We will continue to monitor those comments coming from federal ministers on the state of affairs when it comes to this country's wildfire situation this year. We're getting those updates, and we will go back once the question and answer part of that presentation begins. But we have learned some new information. I want to turn to my colleague Tricia Kindleman, who's joining me in studio now. So we got a better sense of where things stand. It was described this year's wildfires as especially devastating. So talk to us about what we've learned from the ministers so far.
Yeah, I think this gave us a sense with some really solid numbers to sort of give us a picture of what's happening across the country. So 561 fires are burning right now across Canada. Over 3,000 so far year to date have been attacked this wildfire season. Now, what that means is that we are at a level 5 preparedness level across the nation. So now that means that all of the country's resources are engaged. Now, the provinces breakdown is slightly different. There are obviously some provinces that are dealing with more wildfires than others. So when you look at the individual provinces, some of their preparedness levels are lower, but their crews are engaged in other provinces. So like Quebec, for instance, right now, they're not dealing with a lot of fire in their province, but their crews are helping with those fires in the prairies mostly. You can see here on this image that those red dots are currently the out of control fires that are burning really, again, concentrated in Manitoba and Saskatchewan, where we've been hearing just so much about the thousands of people who have been evacuated from their homes in both of those provinces. Right now in Manitoba, over 13,000 people are currently out of their homes. But if we look at some of these other numbers that we learned about today, we have heard really throughout this wildfire season, it's become a standard sort of call, the call for Red Cross donations. We also heard from the provinces of Manitoba and Saskatchewan and the federal government that any donations made will be matched. Now, those donations total to $9.4 million. So that does mean that that total will triple once those matching donations are all calculated together. Now, they did take a bit of a look ahead to what we can expect to see from the rest of this wildfire season, as we are expecting above average temperatures to continue through the end of August, which does mean that particularly in the west, there will be dry conditions with an elevated wildfire risk expected to persist really right through August. Now, of course, this does present a number of economic challenges. Last year, the costs hit about $8.5 billion in damages and in expenses that obviously for those firefighting crews, they have to be paid. Now, the feds have committed to $12 million over 4 years for what they're calling a wildfire consortium, which will be a group that they will use. The experts will bring them together under sort of one umbrella so they can take the data and knowledge that they have sort of gathered and apply it going forward. And one note within that too, Tim Hodgson there, the minister, noting that does include support with Indigenous cultural stewardship. We also heard them talking about some of the practices and that sort of thing, the knowledge again that can be shared through those communities, how they have been so impacted. More than 66 evacuations on Indigenous communities and First Nations. That's meant 39,000 people so far just from those First Nations communities alone have been evacuated this wildfire season, and 30 of those communities do still remain out of their homes at this point.
Okay, Trish, really helpful there because it gives us a summary of what's happening this year and potential plans for years ahead because we're dealing with these wildfires. I actually want to ask you about something related to wildfires last year.
Yes.
You'll of course remember the Jasper wildfire. The community was completely devastated. Thousands of people forced out of their homes for weeks and weeks. And because of the way it was managed, the town of Jasper wanted a review. Well, the report came out last night, and it's created quite a buzz in Alberta, and we're getting lots of response to that. So break that down for us.
Yeah, it has. That's right. So this report was, again, like you said, commissioned by the town of Jasper. It was two independent companies that sort of have compiled the data, the information, have assessed things. And it is saying that there were some efforts that they attribute to the provincial government, saying they hindered efforts to fight the blaze that destroyed a third of that town site and sent 25,000 people fleeing. So now the Premier has reacted to that. She was asked about this report earlier today. Here's what she had to say.
We absolutely did not. I'm very disappointed that this report politicizes what actually should be a very successful example of unified command and support between municipal, provincial, and federal government.
Now, the report did go on to say that Smith's government complicated the response by regularly requesting information by attempting to make decisions despite not being jurisdictionally responsible. Now, the jurisdiction is very complicated when it does come down to a Jasper fire, because of course it is a national park, which does mean that overall the federal government is responsible for its sort of day-to-day operations. But typically a wildfire response is mounted by the provincial government that may be in charge of the municipality. So it was definitely a lot of cooks in the kitchen for this, trying to figure out who was in charge of what at what point. But overall, too, I should note that the report, it did end by saying that once the sort of stuff had been sorted, who was in charge of what, they worked together with much operationality, which means basically they work together easily. I had to Google that definition.
Okay. So Trish, thank you for that. And again, we will go back to that presser with the federal ministers once the question and answer part of it begins. But in the meantime, thanks so much for that. And just a reminder, folks, that you can actually track the wildfire smoke, active wildfires, and the air quality in real time with the CBC News Climate Dashboard. Just search for your town or your city to get the latest forecast and see current air quality conditions. You can also find out how today's temperatures compare to previous years. Just head to cbc.ca/climate to explore the interactive map.